Hi. Welcome to episode 115 of Fresh Air at 5. This episode is entitled, I Intended for More. Well, as you'll hear as we go through this episode, we're doing painting renovations on our house, and that was distracting, and also the weather wasn't as cooperative as I would have liked it to have been, and I intended for more listens. But we got to Friday. I said, hey, I'll record Saturday. Saturday happened, and we slept in, and then had to get doing some housework, and I never got out for a walk. So this is a shorter episode. Got 5 listens for you. 2 new to me podcasts. So check those out. Follow those people. Encourage them. All right, they're new to the Educational Podcast Network. And without further ado, here's episode 115, Fresh Air at 5.
I'm William Andreessen, host of Speaking with Students, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to Fresh Air at 5, the podcast. I'm your host, Brian Carpenter. Fresh Air at 5 is my regular attempt to exercise by walking about my neighborhood, to take in podcast content, then reflect in an unedited video, which I finally post to my Twitter channel. This podcast will be a regular collection of the audio from these selfie videos. You can follow me on Twitter at Fresh Air at 5 or check out my website, briancarpenter.com, for other content I have created and collected. Hey, PLN, it is Tuesday, March 28, 2023. This morning I'm up and out the door. It's plus 5 degrees Celsius. It was like there was a warm wind blowing in from the north. But no, it's still cold, but not -1 like it was yesterday. All right, this morning as I'm out, I listened to a new to me podcast, and new to the Educational Podcast Network, for which Fresh Air at 5 is a member of. And I want to highlight this morning a new to me podcast with Shauna Martin, and she brings us tech tools for teachers. And Shauna, this is exciting to hear, and welcome to the network. So fabulous to have you join Chris Nessie and myself and many others in EPN as we continue to podcast and bring forth content. All right, so as Shauna Martin brings us with her husband, who's the producer of her show, Tech Tools for Teachers, Shauna, in this episode 147, brings us 3 websites for free word play, like crossword puzzle, the Princess Presto wordplay from Super Y on PBS Kids, as well as magnetic poetry. So go check out her podcast and the rationale for why you would use these tools in your classroom space. And I'm really digging a couple of them right now that she talked about. We have the crossword puzzle maker. So it's an online crossword puzzle maker. Students can create a crossword puzzle and download an image of said crossword puzzle or share a URL so it can be completed online, I believe. And the third one was for... What was the third one? Oh, magnetic poetry. And yes, like fridge magnetic poetry. So I'm going to check that out and maybe have my kids make a poem today. And we'll have a collection of poems from my media arts kids. All right, Shauna, thank you so much. You're enthusiastic and energetic, and it was great to hear your voice for the first time. Welcome. Okay, bye. One more thing for March 28, 2023. I got another new to me podcast that came across the Educational Podcast Network recently, and we have 3 new members of the EPN. And this podcast is called Speaking with Students, and Will Anderson in episode 6 has stepped into the EPN and is bringing us an interview style podcast, and it's very conversational between him and a guest. And speaking with students, he talks with possibly, I don't know all the students he's talked to so far. He's only on episode 6, but in episode 6 he talks with a former student of his who was in grade 9 when he was a student teacher. So that's coming full circle, which is pretty rad, as Will is seeing the growth of a certain individual and how she is facing the world and perspectives on her schooling and how it went for her since they first crossed paths in her grade 9 year. Her name is Kat, don't know her last name, and Will speaks with her and talks about her experience, and asks a lesson about high school, and what's a lesson that stood out to you in high school. That's an interesting question. It's 9 years later, and Kat says that it was the problem solving that has stood out the most. What's the point of geometry and working hard and getting through the math, and what does that all mean? That's important that we have a reason for the stuff that we're teaching our students. She also talked about being an independent student and not needing much from anybody, or maybe she didn't realize that she needed anything from the school because she was just getting through it, and was a cheerleader captain, the things that she had done. So I think it's important that we reach out to our students and make sure we're there for them. What's the counseling department got to do with student well-being? All right, thank you so much, Will and Kat. Have a great day. Hey PLN, Thursday, March 30th, 2023. Good morning to you, and I hope you're doing well. As I'm going through this week, we have a painter at our house, and he is going to be painting the main room of our home. And you don't take do you take for granted where you live? Do you take for granted the space that you live in? Well, I do, because I didn't notice how much I take it for granted until it gets all tarped up and I get home from work after a full day and I can't sit on my couch because there's tarps all over it, and plastic on the walls, all over our kitchen, counters, everything. We can't even cook. And so that's where I'm at right now. I was a bit miffed. My wife was as well. But we got through our evening. Our kids, into their respective rooms. Everybody went to bed. And the painter's coming back today to keep working on our home. So that being said, I'm grateful that we have the opportunity to have someone paint for us. Is it inconvenient? Yep, it is. But I'm thankful that we have the resources that we can have somebody paint our home. So that's me arresting some grumpiness and turning it into gratitude. All right, this morning as I'm walking, listen to episode 50 of Evolving with Gratitude, as Lainey Rowell talks with Paige Kouros. Yes, Paige is the wife of George Kouros, and we all know who George is, and George has had an impact on my life. Paige, indirectly you have as well, because you've been supporting George and working with him and doing all the things to make him a good man. So I want to say thank you for that, Paige. On Evolving with Gratitude, Paige brings us narrating the beauty you notice, and she talks about being a mom of 3 little ones and seeing the smiles, seeing nature around her, seeing all the goodness, and talking about it out loud so that her kids can see her talk about it. It was wonderful to hear her little ones on the podcast. And Lainey, thanks so much for having Paige. All right, everybody, take a listen. Okay, bye. One more thing for March 30th, 2023. I listened to an episode of EdTech News Brief with Jake Miller. And Jake, thanks so much for bringing us the news, because all of us don't have the time to sit and sift through all of the EdTech news, but you bring it, and that's so good. So people, you need a quick update on what's going on with some EdTech around us and some of the things that are going on. It might not be everything, but it hits some major points, and that's helpful because, I even missed some of the major points. Obviously, mostly because where do I get my news? I get my news from EdTech journalists like Jake Miller and Holly Clark and Casey Bell and others like them. All right, so Jake, on episode 18 of the EdTech News Brief, you bring us updates on what's going on with ChatGPT and how ChatGPT is using the language model 4.0 now instead of 3.5 and how much more powerful it is. Jake, I was trying to get on there last night to do something and I couldn't get on because it said you're not logged in properly and it was giving me a hassle. So, I've had server issues that I can't access it because of, the server being overwhelmed. And maybe it's because I'm cheap and I haven't paid for the subscription for ChatGPT. Maybe that's something I need to do, but I don't need it that badly. So therefore, I won't be getting it. Okay, that's the beginning. He brings us Canva updates with Google Canva Docs, not Google Docs, Canva Docs, and how Canva Docs is like Google Docs and Microsoft with the added bonus of the Canva creativeness right there with it, and how we can take Canva Docs and put them into a presentation. Maybe I'm slow, but I'm struggling with trying to balance all the platforms. We're in the transition right now between Google and Microsoft and going from Google to Microsoft, and that's distracting. But all right, other things going on in EdTech News Brief. Take a listen. Thanks, Jake. Appreciate it. Good to hear your voice, man. Keep on smiling, bro. All right, bye-bye. The last thing for March 30th, 2023. I can't believe it's March 30th. We are 1/4 of the way through the school year. January, February, March. Yeah, that's 1/4 of the way through the school year. Not the school year, this year of 2023. It is cooking fast. It is moving, and it seems like it's hard to keep up, but we're doing it. You know what? Just hang on, people, and keep on moving. Keep moving. All right, as I'm wrapping up, I listened to episode 173, I think, maybe 174, of the Teaching Champions podcast with Brian Martin. It's a real recent one where Brian brings us a question: are we teaching the growth mindset falsely in our classrooms? And he has prepared a short podcast. It's really quick. Take a listen, because you know what? We talk about growth mindset. We talk about improving and being better than we were, and about learning and, noticing things and putting an effort. But he talks about some misconceptions that Carol Dweck brings to light in her book about this groundbreaking topic back when she wrote it. And she talks about, praising the effort when the effort isn't there. Do we do that? Do we go, good job, when, the kid hasn't done anything to get a good job? Are we praising the process much more than the outcome of the learning, And so making sure that we're keeping our focus on what the outcome is that we're after, and not solely focusing on the outcome, but focusing on the process along the way, because the process will take us a lot further than just solving and getting to that outcome of that learning. So process is key, and it's super important. I see process everywhere, and it's the slow, everyday things that we do that make a bigger difference in our lives than, getting that prize, getting that to that thing. We get awards and things possibly, but how do we get those awards? How do people get Grammys and things like that when they're, out, producing films and things like that? But it's a process along the way. All right, gonna say goodnight, or say bye to my son who's just leaving for work right now, and we will talk to you guys later. Bye. As my one word for 2021 is appreciate, I appreciate you giving me a listen as I've created this podcast experience for you. It's a unique Blinkist or Coles Notes version of the content I take in, like a highlight reel, so that you can hopefully find other interesting podcasts you may not have considered before. I've recorded the specific podcast episodes in the show notes for your learning convenience. Please subscribe so you don't miss any of my upcoming episodes. And if you enjoyed this podcast and its format, share it with someone else. Tweet about your experience or give it a review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Fresh Air at 5 can also be found on Voice Ed Radio. Your voice is right here, and on the Education Podcast Network, podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. I hope you have a fantastic day and get some fresh air before the day is out, and take care of yourself because you're worth it.